everybody. Hello, beautiful Kerri. Kerri Saint from Australia. It's always such a beautiful pleasure to see you. And welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And I kid you not, the minute I play the intro, my neighbor starts with his weed eater. It's uncanny.
I normally have the dog barking down the back the minute we come on.
I kid you not. I'm like, you've got to be shitting me. Anyway, so I might get up just and close my sliding door if it becomes unbearable. Sure. But if that be the case, just that's what I'm doing. But yeah, welcome and Merry Christmas, beautiful. Oh, and I hope you're having a fantastic holiday. How was your Christmas? How was your holiday?
Oh, it was good. I went away for a few days and spent some time with my daughter and her family, and it was really lovely. I got to play Nerf guns with my grandkids. It was really funny because I've still got a Nerf gun here from my son who passed away. I just kept it, one of his toys, and I went and bought some bullets while I was about as a little. And I took it with me, and I think it was Christmas Eve. I was just sitting there, and they had their family there, and my son-in-law's family was there. They got 2 young girls. And I could tell my grandson was getting a bit bored, and I'm like, come here. And he leans over and I says, how many Nerf guns you got? He goes, why? I go, Grandma bought some bullets and a Nerf gun with me. He goes, really? Like, he's 12. So he runs upstairs, and he doesn't come back with a little Nerf gun. He comes back with something like big, and you've got to put in a whole heap of bullets. This is how he treats Grandma. He's not willing to go, here, Grandma, you have mine. So I've got just one. I've got to keep reloading it. It was so funny. We were just in their house. There was a top story and bottom story. Couldn't go far. And he thought it was funny to keep pegging me pretty hard. And I got him right between the eyes, which was hilarious. And then my granddaughter got involved, and then their cousin got involved. And there was a little girl. They've got a little daughter. I don't know how old she is, 3 or 4, something like that. Maybe a bit older. And she had these little reindeer little things on her head, and my grandson's shooting at me, and they're going over the top of her, and I just held the Nerf gun to Bambi. Keep shooting, Grandma, Bambi gets it. So she gets up. She goes and gets a gun. That's it. She's knee-high to a grasshopper. She gets a gun as big as her. She's loading it, right? And us bigger, well, I'm saying I'm the big kid playing with the other kids. And she's like Rambo. Seriously, this little kid just ran towards them, going bang, 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 bang. Like, it was absolutely hilarious. It was killing me laughing. So that was my New Year's night. That was really funny. So
you mean Christmas night? New Year's is still coming, right? In a few days.
Yeah. Like, this is me. It's not me sitting around drinking cups of tea or whatever, like, I'll hop in and play with the kids because that's a whole heck of a lot more fun. And so I got shot up pretty bad, but I gave as good as I got. So
no doubt you did, Grandma. Well, I gotta tell you, I was definitely looking forward. Well, I haven't seen my granddaughter. So I will definitely be going to spend some time with her and making up for lost time sometime towards the beginning of the year. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again, Wild Aussie Woman, M Love, and
everyone.
So nice to see you guys. Yeah, we had actually a great time. We did a live Zoom gathering. Actually, well, it was Christmas Eve for me, Christmas, or not even Christmas Day, whatever you have, the day before Christmas for most Americans, and you Aussies would have been snoring a long time ago during that time. But it was really, really cool to see a lot of, and just connect with people, say hi to them, get to know their voices and their faces. And by the way, we're doing it again on New Year's, guys. So for those of you who want to connect, Kerri, you should really just stay up and join us for that. So absolutely set your alarm clock. It's actually going to be, well, we're going to be we're going to be doing a show for probably about an hour at 7 to 8 my time, 7 p.m. What is the time there now with you?
It is now 7:30. 7:30.
11, up past 11, up past 12, up past 1, up past 2, up past 3, up past 4, up past 5, up past 6, up past 7. 8 hours. So you are 8 hours ahead of me. So from 8, so like 4 in the morning for you. It's not too bad, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 in the morning for you, it'll be on New Year's Day. So join us because we're going to be having another gathering with Caleb. Well, first, as I said, we're going to be just doing a show, our usual show on Sunday, and then we're doing a gathering again. I will let you guys know.
Probably good. Yeah, I saw the one you put out for Caleb, and I did think about it, but I was too busy shooting grandkids. And
I was going to say,
there was absolutely nowhere I could go to join, so I thought, I'm going to have to miss it out, and so yeah, but. Yeah.
Well, Wild Aussie Woman, it's once in a year that we do that. So unfortunately, we're working more according to the American schedule here. But yeah. But yeah, it was so fun actually, as I said, to get to know everyone and just say hi, and everyone just kind of like popping in and showing their face, and it was really, really good. Anyway, hope to see you guys there again on a New Year's Eve or New Year's morning or Old Year's Day, whatever you call it, on the 31st. And it'll be, as I said, we start the show 7 p.m. my time, GMT +2. So we'll go for about an hour. And then probably 8 to 8:30, we will then join over and we will do on Zoom, as we did this past week, the live gathering. So it'll be nice to have you all there again.
That's good.
Anyway. So I'm interested to know about your topic today, young lady. Surviving a mother. Interesting.
Yeah, I had my granddaughter we were watching something over Christmas, and my granddaughter is 16, and I can't remember what exactly was, but there came a discussion out of it because she couldn't understand why this person was putting themselves in a particular predicament, right, in a bad way in this movie. And I turned around, looked at my daughter, and I said, well, I identified, because she had a really dysfunctional childhood, whoever this person was in this movie, and my granddaughter couldn't understand it. Like, why would they put themselves in this situation? And I'm like, well, when you've had a really dysfunctional childhood, it's often very difficult to navigate out of that, to know, kind of like, to start making good choices for yourself. And anyway, because my daughter's 16, I'm 60, she has no concept of what I grew up with. She's had very loving parents and very
your granddaughter, you mean? Your granddaughter's 16, right?
Yeah. And she's had very loving parents and very supportive and loves school and stuff, so she didn't have anything like my childhood. So it's very hard for her sometimes to kind of absorb why some people do the things they do, because that she's not had similar experiences. And I started to talk to her from my experience and reflect on some of the things that I've gone through. And I think your reaction to because we didn't get into it the last interview, but your reaction to when you asked about the boyfriend witnessing me being thrown into the fridge, you asked me, did I marry them? And I said yes. And I kind of didn't remember that I got thrown in the fridge until much later in life. It's quite funny. I'd sort of not. And I thought, I just saw your reaction. It's like, why? And I go, yeah.
Honestly, I can understand that. Trust me, I have made some pretty crappy choices in my life as well, without having been through a tenth of what you guys who've been in these types of situations have been in. Rest assured, in my situation, as a healer, I always think I can fix someone, right? And I always thought that'd be different with me. And even though I was on many occasions, I knew what I was letting myself in for. I knew, but I thought I could change them.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, that did not happen. That did not happen. And I've had to learn the hard way, and not just in relationships, but in friendships, sometimes business type of arrangements as well. I put heart and soul into what I do. And very often I have kind of come out of there being kicked in the teeth. So for me, I've had to also discern boundaries, which is not everyone is worthy of that kind of commitment or that kind of energy input from you. And there again, we can look at where that comes from or blah, blah, blah. There's always a subtle nuances. But, for me, it's always about the intention as well. And really, it's like someone said something very interesting to me the other day, Kerri. As a healer, you take on others' pain. As a healer, you're working with some very hurt people. And those hurt people only know how to hurt.
Yeah.
So I think in those types of situations, we've got to cut ourselves some slack as well, right? I think in that situation as well, it's really what you knew, and he was probably a safe place for you at that time, even though he wasn't necessarily perpetuating that cycle at the time. I'm not sure what happened afterwards, but he was probably the best option out of everything you'd experienced. I don't know. What do you say to that?
Well, I think I was focusing on not marrying my father. So,
right.
And he was obviously he was nothing like my father. However, it wasn't until many, many years later that I realized I'd married my mother.
Isn't that interesting? Because I'll tell you something else, just in terms of that. Over the years that I have worked with people, there was a time where for at least 2 years, 70% of my clientele was gay women, right? And out of all those women, only 3 had not been violated by men. And on some level, it was always a father, a grandfather, a brother, a cousin, somebody close to them. So what they then perceived was that men were the perpetrators of violence or pain. So unconsciously, they would then go and be with other women, right? Because they would think that you're not getting that from another woman. But as we understand in these situations, like attracts like, right? So invariably, they would be attracting a lot of hurt women as well. And let me tell you, when 2 hurt women get together, I have seen the most atrocious things take place. Because when you look at female energy, it's water. Remember, female energy is emotion, which is water energy. It knows no boundaries.
Yeah.
So when 2 women, and I've had very frank discussions, because I have a lot of gay female friends as well, and they would say straight up, to me, with a woman, with another woman, you can push those boundaries. You can push those boundaries. And they have, I can't even begin. One of the things I'll tell you is that they actually would rape each other with bottles. Right?
Oh.
That to me was one of the most horrific things. That's how they would hurt the other one and punish them for whatever. That's the type of extremes we're speaking about here. But during the therapy, we get to a certain point, and I clicked on very quickly that the person they're actually most angry with was the mother. Because if you think about this, the baby's in the mom's womb for 9 months, where it's safe. It's that connection they have. They're connected via the umbilical cord. They have this safe little incubator inside mom, Mom is taking care of them, mom is feeding them, mom is nurturing, mom, you know. And the minute they get out, they're exposed to this horrible life. And the question so many of them asked me is, where was my mother? Why was she not defending me? Why was she not protecting me? Why did she not stop this? And very often the mother would herself be abused, right? Or violated on some level. But that was very often, when you're looking on the psychological level, if you will, they were most angry at mom. Because mom was the one that didn't protect them. So there was no protection, not from mom or from dad, which is very, very interesting that you say that. So it's like trying to avoid marrying your dad meant that you married your mom. And really, are they that different at the end of the day in the situation you were in, right?
Yeah. And out of respect to my children, I don't want to talk about my ex. I didn't wish him well. And yeah, so I prefer not to, but for my kids' sake. I think that's something that a lot of parents, when they go through divorce, don't realize that they still need to be aware of their children, because what you're going to say about their parents will reflect back on them. And, you know, because I had it growing up with my adopted parents being derogative and negative, particularly my adopted mother against my biological mother all the time. And all that did was devalue me, you know. So so I'll probably never, ever expose or say things about my ex-husband for the sake of my children. And yeah, just wish him well. And, you know, so that's it. I just want to leave that there. But just to lead in is...
No, I respect that.
And the reason that I say that wanted to sort of bring that up was because there were many... It took me a long time to really identify who was the main perpetrator in this relationship. I mean, the adoptive father was definitely very aggressive, and he would never sit you down and talk to you, and he did a lot of physical attacking, but he was often set up and goaded by the adoptive mother. I felt like we were all held hostage to her emotional stuff, like the damage. So she was playing games with all of us, even him. So
you're saying that she was actually the main perpetrator. And that's very interesting, because if you look at a lot of the conversations we've had with Jessie, she's brought out that up until recently, it was the mothers of darkness running the shadow government. The Queen Mother of Darkness and the Mothers of Darkness running the government. And how many women, the shadow government, and how many women in the system were actually the perpetrators of violence. And these women and their covens, right?
So she seemed to have a lot of power, and it was very... there were definitely times that she would implode and be difficult, and it'd be very obvious, but a lot of it was very covert. Like it was... the first time I ever went to counselling about it, as it sort of started to really hit me, like the different things that were coming, you know, things I completely blocked out, was... I put it like, well, to me, growing up felt like I was in the Vietnam War, where you never knew where a booby trap was. You never knew where a sniper was. You never knew where the danger was. You're walking through a jungle, and every step you take, you know that danger's there, like, and it catches you by surprise. Where the adoptive father was more predictable, right? You kind of knew what would tick him off. He wasn't sitting there stewing how he was going to get back at you. The adoptive mother was, and you just never knew. And it wasn't a lot of times it was her that was doing it. She was setting it up so somebody else would do it to you. And so that's what made it very confusing with her. And then the minute that there was any sign of her kind of getting found out, she becomes the victim, or she's needing an operation, or she's faking suicide, or she's running away, right? And so you're constantly not knowing, like, where the enemy was coming, like how it was coming, you know. And she was very good at covering herself and covering her bases. So I think when I first started to kind of like talk about things, I brought up a lot of stuff about the adoptive father when I first started going to counselling. Never talk about the adoptive mother. Took me a long time to start revealing things about her, because it was just so messed up. And there were just things I just felt I just couldn't talk about that were just messed up on every level. So, and the hardest thing about the adoptive mother is that I was still dealing with it up until 7 years ago when she committed suicide. So the abuse never stopped with her. It continued right until the day she took her last breath. And even after, like, I was still getting shrapnel from things she'd done after she had died. And unlike my adoptive father, where there was some sort of reconciliation with him, there was we managed to talk about the abuses. I was able to forgive him. I was able to have some peace with him. With the adoptive mother, that never occurred. So even though there were many attempts by myself to try and work through them and get her help, it just never happened. So that's why I'm titled this Surviving Mother, because I'm still surviving mother. Like, it's still, there's stuff there that, you know, I still probably, I admit, I still have to process through and come to some place and to be at peace with.
I think you know what's important, you know, when we just look at the psychology of kids and parents, the most important relationship you're ever going to have to begin with is with the same sex parent, right?
Yeah.
So daughters with mothers, because if you look at a baby, the first thing that they see is mom and dad, right? And they are going to mold themselves on mom and dad, because that's the first two beings they get to understand. I wouldn't even say understand, but to see, right? So when your parents are violators of you, that would immediately, I mean, it sets the stage for you to then move into those types of relationships for the rest of your life. And as women, we become our mothers and we marry our fathers usually, right? Or so it would seem on the surface. Are you there, Kerri? I'm just wondering if you've gotten stuck. It seems Kerri has disappeared. I thought so. It seemed like, I hope she tunes back in. But anyway, what I was saying, which is actually very interesting, what Kerri is talking about, is that we then would then become our mothers and marry our fathers very often, right? And when we will often, as women, blame our fathers for the violence. And I mean, this I can talk about through years of therapy with people as well. But then, as Kerri was pointing out, the men would obviously be seen as the main perpetrators, but women, the mothers, yeah, Kerri says she is coming back, but mothers are often seen as more helpless or couldn't get involved, or themselves being the abused ones, right? But then obviously realizing that the female in this equation, or the mother in this equation, is very often actually the one that is the most manipulative, the one that actually mostly goes out there and in the background creates more drama and more trauma and really sets the stage. And I think in what Kerri was saying in her situation as well, is that would then fake suicides or get sick or whatever it might be on a much more subtle level. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic when we talk about surviving our mother. Because very often the moms seem as if they're the ones that are taking care of everyone, and the dads would often come across as being violent or aggressive or alcoholics or whatever. And I think when we start digging a little bit deeper, we can actually see that there's a lot going on beneath the surfaces. And I go back to, you know, what Jessie was talking about as well, you know, in the system. The four mothers of darkness, and then the queen mother of darkness, which was her proctor, was literally, they were head of the shadow government. Jessie's proctor would sit having these conversations with Lucifer, basically, day in and day out, night in and night out, and then passing that, what Lucifer's desires were, throughout the entire system. So then that was then given to the different people in the different sort of parts of the system to carry out. And that was done by a woman. And remember, we must remember, women are highly intuitive. Women can be highly, highly manipulative. Yeah, Kerri comes back now. Oopsie. And I think what most of us don't actually... Hi, nice to have you back. Well, I was just talking again about the woman, and most of us don't see it coming from the woman or the mom, right?
No. So yeah, sorry, I lost power.
No, it's all good. I realized you were sitting frozen, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if that's me or you, because obviously sometimes when my internet does that, I don't even know when I'm being cut off. I'm still chatting away. And the next minute, boom, I'm gone.
It wasn't just internet. The whole power went out. The whole house, I was in total blackness. Everything gone.
Wow. And you're back now, I hope?
I'm back. Yep.
You're sounding a bit like South Africa now, load shedding there, babe.
Someone fiddled with the light switch. Yeah. So anyway.
Well, clearly something's happening. Yeah. We were just talking about the moms, and I think just the as you were saying, you know, one often will associate abuse with male energy, right? Because I think they are a lot more physical. Men will demonstrate things a lot more physically. You know, the fists will fly and stuff like that. Women do it on a very different level, although it's not a rule, right? I'm not saying it's a rule. I mean, there are certainly that. I mean, I know in our house, my mother certainly slapped my ass a few times, but she was generally the protector. My father was not violent at all, but you know, when you get to be teenagers and you go, we want to go to a party, Mom, you know, ask my dad, he'll give you a straight out no, you know, and you go, Mom, and this and that, and you give Mom reasoning. She says, okay, let me speak to your father. 99% of the time, you know, we got our way through Mom. And in my opinion, that's where it's supposed to be. And, you know, also my family as well, when it came to going on the farm, obviously when there was hunting and stuff going on, my father would not let us, the girls would not let us go and observe that. And I remember him saying to me, girls protect life. They have babies, they give life, they do not take life. So for me, I've always remembered that. And I think that, you know, when we think about that in that kind of way, it's a shocking thing to observe just how manipulative the female of the species can actually be.
Yes, very. And unfortunately, as a child, I got my adoptive father and his best friend had decided, I don't know whether this, I can't remember what it was for, but they had a pig that they had bought and planned to kill, and the gun had not worked, and they'd strung this thing up underneath the tank and beat it to death. And I think I might be about 6. So you can imagine the screaming that this poor animal did while they slaughtered it because they had to kill it. You pick up a little baby.
That is unbelievably disturbing.
I know.
for me
I
to
think I
hear.
would have been about 6 at the time. So yeah, I can still hear it in my ears, like what it was like. So yeah, very violent. And the things, the adoptive mother never protected at any level from anything that the adoptive father did. Like it was, and like I gave the example last time about the water. You know, I came home and the horse needed water, and she deliberately made sure that she let him know that I wasn't jumping when she had intended for me to jump through her hoops. And so that's when I saw her physical reaction, like walk past the door and the window. I knew I had to be very quick to get out of that house to save myself from my adoptive father. I knew what was coming, but I didn't move quick enough because he met me at the back door and threw me into the fridge. But that's exactly the reaction that she wanted from him. That's what she wanted. And that's what would happen a lot when I was growing up. There were no questions like your mum had said this or whatever. He would just react to whatever story she was making up. And I'd come to realize that my adoptive mother made many, many stories up, stories that were so bizarre that it just boggled the mind. Like, this is why I had no idea what I was up against. So the example being my youngest sister, I'd left home, I was married, I'd been married for a number of years. And my youngest sister, she was fostered until she was about 18 or 17, 18. And she was only about 17 at the time. I remember the adoptive mother coming to me and saying, can you talk to your sister to go on the pill because she's having trouble with her periods, blah, blah, blah. So I said, yeah, sure. So I talked to her, not a problem. Didn't know why I had to do it, but, you know, that was what she did. Not thinking as again, like this is before I remembered all the abuse. This was like, you know, so I talked to my little sister gets on it, and then months later, the adopted mother disappears. And I mean disappears. And and I get a call from the police because my little sister has gotten into trouble where she worked, and my little sister come to stay with me. And it was then that the little sister shared with me things that were happening to her at home from the adoptive father and the adoptive mother. I didn't realize that the abuse was occurring to her. And this was when I was like 27, when I was just starting to remember the bits and pieces of abuse. So I was quite upset to hear that my adopted sister was copying what I was remembering I'd copped as a child. And the adoptive mother had gone missing for, I don't know, weeks, 6 weeks probably by this stage. And I decided to go find her. And before I did that, I'd had a discussion with the adoptive father. And he was saying, it's your sister's fault she's missing. Your mother's missing. I'm like, why? What did she do? She says, well, she's sleeping with boys. Here's the proof. She's on the pill. Now, can you see how my little adopted sister was set up? And I said, that was done because that was through the adoptive mother's instigation. That's not. So he was angry and he was obviously, you know, not happy about it, but that was the reason my adoptive mother gave to have an explosion and disappear and blame it on the little sister. These are the things that I would cop, right? So I had the little sister come live with me, and my little sister starts sharing certain stories that really, really distressed me. So I went searching for my adoptive mother. I showed up at her sister's place. I walk in the door and I go, I want to know where my mother is. And this is my mother's sister, adoptive mother's sister. And she goes, no, you want to just abuse her and you hurt her feelings. You go to visit your real mother every weekend. You fly up to Townsville every weekend to visit your real mother. And just start saying things that are just really bizarre. And I'm like, that doesn't occur. What are you talking about? I don't go visit my mom. How can I afford to? Like, that's crazy. I work. I've got 2 young kids. So eventually she gives me the address, and I find my mother in a place about 45 minutes away. She'd been hiding out. She wasn't the only person that knew where she lived was her sister. It was about 9:30 at night, and I walk up the back stairs, knock on the door, and my adopted mother opens the door up. She's quite shocked to see me standing there. And I'm like, I want to know what you're doing. I want to know why you're hiding out. What is going on? The first thing that came out of her mouth, she raises a voice at me and she says, I'm here because you're not protecting me from your father. And she just said it with such anger, you know, like, I'm here, my life's a mess because of you. And by this stage, I had started to remember the abuse, right? So I had some ammunition. So I just looked at her and I said, oh, well, that's interesting. Where were you when we were working in the charcoal pits? Where were you when I was being beaten? Where were you when I was set on live? Where were you? And I just rattled a few things off. And she looked at me like I just saw the look on her face as if to go, you remember? Like, yes, I remember. She goes, but her words were, I don't remember. And I said, yes, I do. I said, in the last few weeks, I've been remembering all these things. And I said, where were you? I said, you're the adult. We were children. Where were you? And I said, I can tell you where you were. I said, you were standing 3 feet from me and turned your back and did nothing. And then at that stage, wow, she moved over to a chair. And this is where she went into victim mode. And she had her head down, like, oh, and shaking, and, oh, you know, poor her. So I lowered my voice and I kind of sat down on the floor trying to get a good eye shot at her and let her know there's different things I was remembering. And one of them was that what she said to me, if you don't behave, if you don't do as you're told, if you're not cooperative, you will be sent away to a home run where children go. You'll be stripped naked. You'll be chained to a bed with no mattress. You'll be beaten and strapped every day, be fed on bread and water, and have rats crawl over you.
Good God. So how did she respond? I'm interested to know how she responds to that. When she got
upset. At that stage, she got really angry. She stood up and she disappeared into a bedroom, and I could hear rummaging around. She's screaming at me, you think I don't love you? You think I don't love you? And she's rummaging. And I'm thinking, what's she rummaging for? And all of a sudden, she brings out a frame with obviously my husband and I and our children on there in a photo. It wasn't hanging on the wall. Where do you put your kids' photos? You put them out in the lounge room or wherever people come in. But no, my photo was buried in a box in the wardrobe at the bottom of the box. And I had begun to work out that I knew where I stood with my adopted mother when I walked in the house to see where my photos were. If I was in her good books, they were in the lounge room. If I was upsetting her, they were moved further back in the house down the hallway. If I was in her really bad books, they were buried under something in a box. So she wiped me. So this is what she did. She had this photo of my husband and my children in a box, hidden away. And she tried to tell me, I love you. And I go, no, you don't, And I just let her know that I was starting to remember things, that she had no right to be hiding out. She had to face her own stuff with Eric. Us kids aren't going to protect her. Nobody protected us. And then I left, right? And that was it. I just left. Anyway, she obviously went back to the adoptive father within weeks. 9 years, dead set, this woman holds a grudge. 9 years later, right? And it was Christmas time. And who's there is this aunt who I hadn't seen since that time. And this poor woman, every time she saw me, I got close to her, she'd get really agitated and pull away from me and wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't make eye contact, and she looked really distressed. The adoptive mother, she's all happy, she's having a great time. Anyway, this went on all day, and the aunt left, and it bothered me. I got home, and after a few days, I thought, oh, I'm going to ring this aunt and figure out what the problem is. But this aunt starts to tell me what happened 9 years. So it was 9 years had passed since I'd tangled my adoptive mother at this place. So the next morning, the aunt had shown up at the house, and here's my adoptive mother supposedly throwing up in the toilets because I'd bashed her. So the sister...
bashed her. Yeah, okay,
well,
I mean verbally. Right,
yeah. Not physically. Apparently I had bashed my adoptive mother.
Physically, as in punched her?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
So my adoptive mother was putting on the best show that she could put on in front of her sister. And for 9 years, this sister was very upset at me, to the point that the day we finally meet, she's having a meltdown because she believed it. So I end up sharing with her. I said, look, never happened. Yes, we exchanged words. No physical contact occurred at all. And then as I started to talk, I said, and then I got her to realise, how could I possibly fly up to Townsville? It's an 18-hour drive, so a few hours flight, Townsville every weekend. I said, think about that for a minute. How could you think that's true? And of course she realised, oh, yeah, well, no, hang on a minute. And then after a while she says, oh, yeah, she says, when your mum was a little girl, she was always getting us kids into trouble with lies. And I'm like, she's still doing it. They just get bigger and better. And so that was just an example of what can occur like years down the track from an incident like that. The truth never, ever, ever came out of her mouth. That it wasn't even just, bending it a little bit to suit herself. She would create huge lies to get people to hate you and turn on you and think the worst of you. You would show up to family gatherings and have absolutely no idea why you're being treated in a very strange way. And so these are the games that she played. And so she would lie to me.
What's her story, though? I mean, I'm interested to know because, I mean, did she have a similar type background? What was her childhood like? Because when you looking at the way she treated kids, I mean, she obviously didn't have much love for them. She was obviously really much bit of a psychopath herself.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. She was very closed off about her childhood. We only had contact with two of her sisters, which were both lovely. One of them was just adorable, had lots of children, got on really well with her. I think my grandmother, her mother, lived with us when I was first born because I inherited her duchess and bed and stuff, but nothing. And it wasn't until she died that I rummaged through some of the adoptive mother's personal belongings, and I found a family tree. And I wish that I had taken it because I don't know what happened to it. And the family tree talked about some sort of religious group that the family had belonged to. So I'm not sure. She doesn't have a middle name, and I don't know whether she was in Germany and her family were and had to get out. But she definitely belonged to some sort of religious organization. And I know that for me growing up, I was always interested in God, but the minute I would mention anything, it was shut me down and, hate on anything to do with God whatsoever.
Wow.
So,
did they have biological kids of their own?
No. As far as I know, I think she was pregnant when they first got married, and they had either a motorbike accident or a car accident. She lost the baby and couldn't have any of her own.
I just find it insane that a person that comes from a normal background, when I say normal as possible, right? And that
Yeah.
actually turns out to be so psychopathic. And okay, so if you're saying that she lost her baby, maybe she never got over that. Maybe there was
Yeah.
always that PTSD from losing her child. But I mean, something definitely went wrong somewhere
Yeah.
for a woman, a mother, to be treating kids like that. How many kids were adopted in your family?
4.
4.
Mm.
And what was the situation with them all?
The first one, the one that's the oldest one, just above me, he was the product of a family friend. And I think they were on a waiting list, and they probably would have got me first, but this family friend kept leaving her son with them and going off. And eventually they said, look, he's getting confused and calling us mum and dad. You either let us adopt him or take him for good. So that's how he ended up there. And then I came along 3 years later, and then they adopted another child about 2.5 years after me. And then I was 12 and they fostered a young girl. And I'm pretty certain she was, like, once the foster money ran out, that's when they decided to adopt her. And she didn't work in the charcoal pits because of being fostered, and the fact that, there were some sort of contact with the department at the time. When it came to us being adopted, there was no contact with social workers or department or checks and balances. But being that she was fostered, she had some medical conditions that needed to be addressed. So there were reports and stuff. So she wasn't working in the charcoal pits, but there was definitely stuff going on in the family, like, and the mental stuff that the adoptive mother would do. By all perceptions, it looked as if, that she was well cared for, but when you dig in a little bit deeper, it definitely wasn't happening. And so there was a lot of secrets, like there was a lot of concealing things. But the adoptive mother concealed so much from the neighbors and so much from the adoptive father, and none of us were talking. Like, none of us were talking to each other, let alone revealing anything to anybody outside of the home. Like, there were explosions and abuse, especially on the weekends when we worked in the charcoal pits, and we'd have to show up to school on Monday morning looking perfectly normal. And because there was always that threat, she made it really real that we were going to be sent away. So we dared not tell anybody, because we thought, well, what's going to happen worse? And where we're living is probably bad, but obviously it's going to be a lot worse if we ever say anything. So
I think, it's absolutely insane to me that that's how people actually, it's just a mind boggle, as you say, when you were. And the eldest one, the family friend?
yeah. What are you
Was it a
asking?
boy?
Yes.
Was that a boy?
Yes.
And was he treated in a better way because he was a family friend? Or how did
Yes.
that work?
Yes, because there was still some contact by them, especially rumors are that they knew who the father was as well, and he kind of lived in the area. But we came home as kids, because we lived in Anala, which is like a wall-to-wall housing commission homes, and then the charcoal pits were in another area about an hour away in a place called Park Ridge. Lots of bushland, no electricity, no running water, no anything. And we would spend every Friday to Monday and every school holidays, every public holidays, working in these pits, and then come back to Anala and go to school where he worked as a bus driver. So nobody got to see in an hour what we were going through, except sometimes we would all have to pile in the car covered in soot, head to bottom. Like we were filthy from working the pits because we'd finish up maybe Sunday evening late and we'd have to pile in the car. We would have no dinner or anything, and we'd drop him at the to be taking food. Well, most of the time he was in the car naked because he would have gone in the dam for a swim to wash all the soot and stuff off and just wrap a towel around him. Us kids are in the car, and he'd stop at the shops and he'd say, all right, someone's got to get out and buy dinner. The adoptive mother refused to get out of the car, so it was us kids. So my brother and my oldest brother and I would often have to get out of the car. I was terrified because I'm now in my normal environment where your kids from school can see you. You go to school Monday morning where they've seen you looking like you're like you look like an orphan that worked in the coal mine, which basically I was. Like what you would cop when you went to school the next day. So apparently there was one incident where my brother was like that, and his biological mother saw him covered in soot and then regretted adopting him out. I found that out by his half sister, who was older than him because she had older children, told me that her mother was very remorseful at adopting him out. So yeah, wow. if my biological mother, you can imagine like what I was going through. If my biological mother could have come to visit to see what things were like, could you imagine the reaction that may have occurred? But a lot of people never saw it, and what people did see it either contributed to it. They didn't stop it because their attitude was that we were throwaway children that were unwanted. So I didn't know better. So basically, you know, I got my I was getting married at 18, and the day of my wedding, my adoptive mother hands me my adoption papers, and I'd never seen them before and didn't pay a great deal of attention to them at the time. I just put them away, and probably a couple of weeks after I got married, I pulled them out and realised that my biological mum's name was on these adoption papers. So I go to my adoptive mother to talk to her about them and have a chat about whether it'd be okay for me to go searching for where she's buried. Because remember, my adoptive mother told me my biological mother died giving birth to me. Remember? So I just want to find out where my biological mum is buried. And so my adoptive mother was receptive. She didn't seem closed off. She seemed to yeah, okay, that's fine, and I'll help you. So she says, maybe I should go to the department and see if I can get any information on your mother. And I said, well, good. I just want to know where she's buried so I can go and kind of validate that she existed. And so after, a couple of months, she comes back and she gives me my adoption papers back and says, there's nothing on your mother. That's it. And I kind of thought, oh, well, that's a bit weird. All right. So I walked away thinking it wasn't much of an issue. And then I started searching for my mother, trying to find a grave site. And that's when I applied to births, deaths and marriages. And that's when they must have done a search and they'd found out that my mother was alive but weren't going to tell me because they refused to help me. And I kind of figured once the fella had said to me, what if she's remarried? I was like, hang on a minute. If my mother was dead, what would be the problem of telling me where she's buried? So anyway, I then went through Salvation Army and they found my mother, my biological mum, and I made contact and I wrote to her for 2 years. And I'm not getting right into my biological mum at this stage because you want to focus in on my adoptive mother. So I decide I'm going to visit my biological mother for a month. And I thought, my daughter's 3, I better go and tell her that I found my biological mum. And because my 3-year-old's going to come home from my trip and tell her. So I rock up on the day, sit her down, have a chat to her, and I'm telling her that I actually found my biological mum. And the adoptive mother just implodes, and I mean implodes. She starts slamming her hand down on the table, telling me my mother's dead, that she's not alive. And I said, no, my biological mother is alive. She's not dead. You were lied to. So this is where I'm at. You've been lied to, mums, you know, like, and I'm just here to make sure you're okay and I'm okay. And I'm going to go visit her, and I just want to let you know I love you and I'm not choosing her over you. This sort of conversation, right? But she implodes. She's just lost it. So starts the screaming, get out, you're not my daughter, I don't love you, and don't come back. Absolutely lost it at me. And I was so upset. I probably cried all the way home and didn't know what to do with her reaction. But I still decided to visit my biological mother, and I stayed up there for a month. And so I was up there for a month. I caught a train back, and when the train pulls in, I'm looking for my husband on the platform, and to my shock and horror, my adopted mother's on the platform.
What?
Yes. So I'm just thinking, I don't know, I'm thinking I'm frozen. Like at the first point, I was kind of like, you know, in a hurry to get off this train and getting frustrated because there were a whole line of people in front of me taking their time. It was an 18 train ride, and I was like 6 months pregnant and a little 3-year-old with me. And I just busted to get off this train. As soon as I saw my adoptive mother, I froze. Just time just stood still. And I did not know what to do. I just thought, why? Why is she here? And what is going to happen the minute I get off this train? And as I basically get off, she sort of runs up to me screaming, sort of in a delightful way, and picks up my granddaughter and hugs her. And I'm waiting for any moment for an implosion. And I'm looking at my, you know, she's acting as if I'm her long lost daughter. Like, and so this is where the brain is trying to catch up to the last time I saw her a month before, with her actually screaming blue murder at me, get out, don't come back, you're not my daughter. Then all of a sudden I'm seeing her on this platform embracing me, acting as if butter wouldn't melt in the mouth and she loves me so much and she's so glad I'm back. So
Wow.
I get into...
I have a question here. You have a question here as well. And I want to just speak to Zamek 13. I mean, basically saying, insane how mothers twist and avoid responsibility. Someone in the family was a perv. My mother knew, but still let me sleep over as a kid. She says, I didn't think you'd let anything happen. I mean, and that was, she's saying she was 8 years old. I mean, can you believe that as a mother as well? Yeah. Wow. That I agree, Love. That is so sad. I tell you, I don't know. You know, one thing I'll know, and this I can only relate back to my family. My mother, I mean, astrologically, she's a Leo. And I'll tell you something. She did not let anyone, she could give us the crap she wanted to, but let anyone else touch her kids. And boy, you were dealing with a lioness, that's for sure. Also, Wild Aussie Woman wants to know, so did your adopted mom know your bio mom was alive all that time? I would imagine she did.
I think she did. I think they met. I'll guarantee you they met. My adoptive mother would tell me that my mother had red hair, was short like me, but said she was pregnant at 16, died giving birth to me. So there were things that my adoptive mother said that when I met my biological mother, were true, except for her age, and she was alive. And
well, she kind of took her age by about 20 years, didn't she? It was easier just to deduct 20 years from her age. Wow.
Yeah. So I get in the car with my husband and the adopted mother in the back of my child. And of course, my husband starts asking me, how was your time away? And I'm just looking at him because I'm sitting there thinking, if I say it was good, I'm going to have an implosion in the back seat. If I say it went bad, then I'm going to have somebody that's going to play on that. So can I just read a little bit? This is rough draft from the book that I'm writing. And why I say I married my mother, I just want to mention this because I wrote about it in my book. So the adopted mother loses it when I tell her I'm going to stay with my bio mum. While I was in Townsville with my bio mum, my husband rings me and he starts acting, oh, you're going to come home. Like he's starting to make me feel guilty for being there. Like he's starting to act as, well, don't reject me. Like, are you going to move there? Like, and I'm like, no, because I'm not going to live here. Right? So I worked out in writing the book that the two most significant people in my life would not allow me to build a relationship with anybody outside of them. And these two ended up being the most mentally messing my head up. Right? So,
right.
Okay. So I'll just read a bit from this. So as much as I love visiting and spending time with my family in Townsville, it was mentally hard work, especially with my mother. This is my bio mum. Though they are family, they are still strangers yet familiar. Meeting and knowing the biological family you're never raised with is a constant push and pull of every emotional fibre within you. It's joyful yet sad. In one hand, you feel the joy of connection, yet at the same time grieve your losses. At the same time, you're counting your blessings, but you're also evaluating and measuring just how much has been stolen from you. Adoption is a paradox. It gives and takes at the same time. Adoption sold to the masses as a wonderful gift of saving single women and the babies from a life of stigma, shame, and poverty, while adoptive families are filled with the joy at the blessing of having children they could not have. Adoption has been sold as a win-win for all parties. The dictionary's meaning of paradox, a seemingly absurd or contradictory statement or proposition which instigated may prove to be well-founded or true. Adoption to me is in contradiction to the proposition of its intent. It's an absolute paradox, where despite apparently sound reasoning for adoption, as in the best interests of the child and a win-win for all, the reasoning applied to the acceptable premises of adoption also concludes that what seems logically acceptable is also illogically acceptable. Adoption is meant to provide stability in adoptee's life, yet is fraught with instability. Adoption is a complete contradiction of its intent. It's a paradox in all its form. It is a constant shifting ground, unstable and difficult to traverse, with beautiful, bright, warm sunrises and bitter, cold sunsets occurring simultaneously. 1 minute you think you have all the information needed for your journey to arrive at your destination safely, only to realize that someone stole half your map. My ground is constantly shifting. I'm having to adjust to every type of terrain, weather, hills, and bends, and it seems I can never anticipate what's around the corner. The opposite of paradox is regularity, standard, normalcy, accuracy, success, certainty, same, correct, understanding, truth, regularity, and solution. Paradox is not an oxymoron. An oxymoron uses contradictory words, whereas paradoxes are contradictory ideas. If adoption is a paradox, then I conclude that adoption is basically just a contradictory idea and an illusion, and depending on your view of the world and understanding of adoption, you will conclude it's either a beautiful warm sunrise or a bitter cold sunset or both. That's the paradox of adoption.
Wow.
So it's that's
wow.
Yeah. So I go on to talk about how I get in the car and I'm like, yeah, it's it's a mess. It's when you think about adoption, and depending on where your framework, depending where you're coming in the world, how you're going to see it. The thing is, it's both. And unfortunately, I got the far worse side of adoption by growing up in a really abusive home. But there are children that grow up in loving homes that would say the same thing. That with adoption is love, but grief. With it is joy, but trauma. With it is gaining of adoptive parents, but loss. So that's what
I think it's so important, you know. I mean, I've often spoken about my friends. They're an Indian couple, and they tried for many years to fall pregnant, and eventually, as God's will would have it, there was an Indian baby that came up for adoption in South Africa, and that's so, so rare, right?
Yeah.
And this child, I mean, their birthdays are like literally 3 days apart. This child's birthday was directly slap in the middle of their birthdays. So she's very loved, she's very wanted, but how they've dealt with that is absolutely incredible. And I know my friend went through a really rough time because within 6 months she had this baby, right? She had no preparation. There was no room prepared, nothing, right? It was just like, in fact, it was less than 6 months. I'm going to say probably about 3 months because the baby was just about already there. And when they actually went for the interview, the woman at the agency just immediately matched them to this child. So there was very little emotional, and they also didn't decide. It was only, I mean, when they went for the interview, they were really just testing the waters to see if they did want to adopt. Adoption for them was the last sort of option. And when it happened so quickly, but it's really how they've dealt with that is so incredible. And she looks like them. I mean, this child looks like she could have come out of my friend's womb. Honestly, it's quite uncanny how that's worked. But she has told her in no uncertain terms who her parents are, what the situation between them was, and that they chose her. They chose her to be with them. She is the chosen one for them. So I think that immediately, you know, has given them, and I mean, it's also wasn't a closed adoption. In other words, the father, in fact, passed away not long after that. The mom was still alive, and I know that the mom was then trying to get the baby back. So there was a big thing as well going on behind the scenes, you know. So there was that trauma that they had to deal with. But, you know, just the way that they've dealt with their little girl, and the way they've explained, she's 11 now. She'll be 11 in a few days, actually. You know, from when she was young enough to understand, you know, and I do believe that children who are adopted need to be told, and they need to be given the background and always the option that at a certain age, obviously you need to, if you want to, you must go and look up your adoptive mom or dad, or whatever the case might be, and, you know, be in touch with that family if you choose to. I do agree that when the children are in that, when they're young, it's too traumatic. And I think absolutely at a certain age, then by all means go and see what you can find out and what have you, because I do believe every child needs to know their roots. And that for me is something I have always maintained. I've always maintained that every child needs to know their roots and be told the truth.
You know, definitely. And I've said this in my very first interview, is adopted people aren't bothered by who their adoptive parents are. You could have told me that my adoptive father was an axe murderer. I still would have wanted to know who he was. And
absolutely,
we need absolute transparency, and we need for our adoptive parents to be transparent in their feelings and their fears. Because of course they're going to live with, well, this is somebody else's child, and is this child going to have more feelings for their biological parents than me? And they need help with that. They need help to navigate that. And I think that maybe my adoptive mother suffered something so horrendous that she needed to manipulate so many people around her to hold them close to her, yet she would push us away. There was this constant push and pull with, I want you, don't want you, I want you, I don't want you, I regret having you. But, you know, because there were moments that there was definitely some form of affection. I don't ever remember being hugged. I don't ever remember being held. So, but there were some forms of affection. But I think she was so messed up. And I think in reality, she should never have been allowed to raise children because of how messed up she was. And I remember trying to get her help as often as I could, because I would see this behavior and not understand it, but I knew that something was catastrophically wrong with her, and I couldn't comprehend how anybody could treat a child or their child, they claim as their child, in such a way. Like, there were times when I would accidentally run into her in the street. I'd be out with a girlfriend or my child, and I'd go to wave or beg to come over, and she would just turn her head and walk away with such anger and refuse to even acknowledge me. And I'd be standing in the street going, I don't know what I've done, right?
Wow.
And you've got to think, like, I'm an adopted child. Like, I was told my mother didn't want me and tried to abort me. And this is what I'm having to deal with in my adopted mother's behavior. So where do I ever get to feel safe? Where do I ever get to feel that I'm, like, you know, this unconditional love? Or every step I took,
Absolutely.
I had the idea. Yeah.
And because psychologically as well, I mean, we've spoken about this before. And I mean, if you guys remember Caleb's interview with Kerri at the same time, you know, where his mother actually had a late-term abortion and aborted his brother, but didn't realize that he was still there, right? So he was born by accident as well. And then kept for 2 years by his mom. And I mean, just if you guys have read Caleb's book, one of the miracles is in there when he was 18 months old, how his mom actually then just shoved him in the back room, leaving him to scream. And the dog, in fact, an Australian cattle dog, actually somehow got him and out of that situation and took him in with her and the pups. And I mean, it was absolutely insane, you know, but also this constant unconscious fear of rejection, not being loved, not being wanted, always being pushed aside. And, you know, after that, after 2 years, he was then given to his aunt, because obviously there was issues there because his mom fell pregnant by one night stand when she was already married to someone else. Now you can imagine in the Cheyenne tradition, that's very frowned upon. So she already had a husband who who hated him as well. Tried to get rid of him too in every possible way. I mean, try to take his life as well, right? And then given to the sister who now couldn't deal with him, who then sells him into this Freemason family, where he's now taken and immediately put into the GATE program, and the abuse starts at the age of 5. So it's insane, you know, how this continues throughout your life. And I mean, I know it's like what you're saying, Kerri. Yeah, you are in this adoptive situation, you know, you craving love, you want love, you desire love. As a child, everyone craves that. And your fear is so great that you're not going to receive love, you know, and when it doesn't come your way, I mean, it's devastating. It is absolutely devastating over and over and over again. I mean, it's quite insane. I mean, there was a question up here. Rise and Shine would love to know the connection with the Freemasons. I mean, your family was also, your adoptive family was also a family of Freemasons, right? I mean, And that
Yeah.
was the same thing with Caleb as well. You know, his family was a family of Scottish Rite Freemasons. Very, very smart parents, very well-to-do parents, right? With all these Native American kids, 13 kids they adopted, 11 of them are Native American. I mean, doesn't that just freak you out just a little bit in terms of that?
Wild Aussie Woman said, do you see my question? Which one is that? Why were they allowed to adopt? I think that might be it. No,
yeah, why were they allowed to adopt? Yeah.
No, well, there was no psychological evaluations done whatsoever. They just, so my mother, so I fall under what they call former forced adoptions. Between the 1950s to the 1980s, any woman that found herself pregnant and unmarried was forced to give their child up for adoption. So my mum was a widow. She already had 4 children in her care. She was 35. And so she was pressured and given a pretty hard time about keeping me. So she was forced to give me up. They would put BFA secretly on the single mother's medical files. So all the doctors and nurses and everybody that was involved in this process knew how to hold you and treat you so that you had no choice. You had no way of getting supports to keep your baby. So, yeah, it was basically the criteria was you just had to be married, have a place to live and a job. That was it. And sometimes there were some criteria. I have heard from other adoptive parents that there were visits to the house and such. As far as I know, there was nothing other than being married and having a house. I know children that went home to shacks and pedophiles and just horrid situations. Like Caleb, I was put to work at 5. I started working in charcoal pits. My adoptive father obviously felt he could use his children to make money and did it very successfully. And the adoptive mother did and said nothing to prevent it from occurring. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. So I'll jump to 7 years ago because I actually stopped having contact with my adoptive mother for well over 8 years. My adoptive father passed away. I didn't go to the funeral. I had visited him in the hospital, and that's another story for another time. In the hospital, the adoptive mother wouldn't even look at me, no conversation or anything. And there was no way I was placing myself in her vicinity. I just felt it wasn't healthy. But 7 years ago, I got a call from my youngest adopted sister begging me to check on her because the adoptive mother wasn't traveling well. Her house was unkept. She wasn't bathing. She was locking herself in the house, and my sister was really concerned. My adoptive mother had sort of faked suicides off and on throughout our life. So I thought, well, is she serious this time or not? So I showed up at the house. She opens the door, and I was quite surprised what I saw. She was grey, like deathly grey. She looked like a little old witch. That's what she looked like, unfortunately, all with the hair chins and everything. She pretended not to know me, spoke like a little old witch, spoke in the same way. Who are you? With this really raspy voice. I said, you know who I am? And she told me to get off her property. And I could smell the house. I could see what she looked like. And I got off the property and spoke to my sister. And we arranged, we had to go to the court the next day, and I had to fill out a form to give them a bit of history and our concerns for her. It took about a week for mental health to get a hold of her. And it was funny, I was driving past the hospital. I'd been to a meeting on adoption, and I had one of my adoptees with me, and I just had this feeling to stop by the hospital. And anyway, I went to the desk and I said, oh, is there, and I told them who my mother's name was. Is she here? Has mental health picked her up? And she said, yes, she is. We'll get them to go round to see her. And I said, well, hang on a minute. I said, if I go round there, there's going to be an implosion. I don't think that's a good idea. I need to speak to somebody. So they sent a social worker out, told her the situation, how volatile it could get if I walked in, and they were fine. They were pretty protective. They said, oh, come on in. My adoptive mother is in the bed treating the nurse really nice, but the minute she sees me, she starts yelling at me, you did this to me, you did this to me. And I was told not to tell her that I had done it, which went against the way I felt, but they just said, please don't tell her. I said, all right. So I denied setting it up for the hospital to bring her in. And she teeter-tottered between attacking me and being nice. And then finally she really had a go at me. You did this to me. How dare you, blah, blah, blah. Don't lie to me. And I said, all right, Mum. I said, hypothetical, if I did do this to you, what would you do? And she just straight up went, I will wipe you. You're not my daughter. Get out. I went, well, I didn't do it. It just came out quite comical. I didn't do it then. And of course, I saw the look on her face as to go, oh, you bitch. So I started playing her game, and I was a lot stronger by this stage. 7 years ago, I'd remembered a lot, had a lot of counselling. I sort of had learned to kind of see what I was seeing and knew, like...
Yeah, so obviously done a lot of healing, right? You've done a lot of healing.
Yeah. So...
But I find it very interesting what you said, Kerri, is that she looked like a witch and she sounded like a witch, because to me, that is really just, because this is what happens at that old age. People really kind of become, all the masks fall off. Yeah. So for me, it definitely sounds to me like she was either into witchcraft as a youngster or, had been tampered with in that way, because there is no way that somebody would do that to a child or children who was of a normal thinking mind. No. There's no ways, in my opinion.
And I'm only telling you, at this stage, I'm telling you the G-rated version, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm telling you, it was worse. All right.
I'm sure it was, and I think it's important that we actually hear about that at some point in time as well, because as much as what it's obviously disturbing, and when I start wriggling in my chair, oh man, and I tell you, I've wriggled in this chair so many days chatting with people like yourself. Yeah. But it is just insane to think, and I definitely feel, and especially if she was married into this Freemason family where your father was already that, to do that to an animal, what they were doing to him, to put child into charcoal pits, there's no ways that these are normal human beings. Something has possessed them, or something has occurred in that family where they are not thinking in a human way. I'm sorry. I will always maintain that. These are not human. I'm not saying human beings are perfect, not at all. But the human spirit is of a compassionate nature. Our natural essence is to be compassionate. It does not mean we are perfect. It does not mean we don't harm other things or other creatures at some point in time. But it is our natural essence to be compassionate. From what you're explaining, there was zero compassion there, absolutely zero compassion, and everything was done for her own best purposes, for her survival, for what served her and what suited her. Yeah. And the fact that she was never able to protect you from her husband or your adoptive father is already telling me a lot. And she refused to, so she was turning a blind eye. To me, I feel that this probably occurred to her as a child or something along these lines. It would make sense that they couldn't have kids of their own, because no doubt something would have happened there, especially if the other sister maybe had children, right? And the other sister was fine. You're always going to find, or oftentimes in these type scenarios, you're going to find that one or two of the kids are living the cover life, right? Yeah. They're the ones that put it out to the world that everything is fine. So it would make sense to me that, and especially when you, again, like that's what I said, when you look at her husband she married. It's like that they were matched.
Yeah.
And to be these awful, God-forsaken parents, it's just horrific. I mean, when you talk about these things, it's very disturbing.
So the hospital staff, I let them know that I was quite concerned about her living arrangement, like what was happening in the house. And the staff said, look, see if you can get a key offer to get into the house. And so I went back behind the curtain to talk to her, and I just let her know that the hospital needed to know what heart medication she was on. And all of a sudden she was like being sweet and nice, and can you feed my cat, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, seriously? Okay. She gives me the key to the house. They give me a mask. I've got peppermint oil, because I put peppermint oil because I thought, I don't know what this house is like. And I walked in, I was just aghast. There was a cat in the house, and it had its litter box was overflowing. It was all over the floor. It was on the benches. There was every plate and cup and used pan in the fridge and freezer. There was no food in the house. My bed was soiled. The toilet was in a bad way. So I was gasping to get in his house. She had like cyclone louvers down over the windows. There was no window open whatsoever. I fed the cat, changed the litter box, got the medication the docs wanted, and sorted that out. And she ended up being put into hospital only for a few weeks and getting assessments. I thought, finally, she's going to get assessments. We're going to finally find out what is wrong with her, and she's going to get the help she needs. So while she's in hospital, my best friend and me, we go to the house, and I scrub this house clean. And I mean scrub this house. I was on my hands and knees scrubbing this house, cleaned the fridge out, changed curtain. Like, we did everything that we could. And that was the bit where I was in the bathroom, and it dawned on me that I had no ill feeling towards her whatsoever. Like, you know, after all my battle, you know, as a teenager, and then later in life when I had all the flashbacks and trying to deal with my own anger and the hatred towards myself because of what she did to me, it was just all gone. And I had nothing that I wanted to dump on her, and I just was a bit blown away by it. I wasn't resentful that I was there having to clean up. Anyway,
I think that situation, I mean, the poor cat again. I mean, seriously, the poor cat. You know, I think that situation in itself was self-explanatory. You could just tell the energy, right? And that would have been self-explanatory.
And it was so hard because all those sort of like a big cyclone louver window, I couldn't open them because they were all broken, and I'm having to work in this house, and I was suffocated as a child. So I'm in there having to clean this up, and I'm having flashes of my adoptive father suffocating me while I'm trying to clean this house, and having to run outside and take deep breaths and go back. It was toxic. It was so bad. But I thought, I can't let her come back. I can't go home to my clean house with food in the cupboard and everything and let her come home to this filth. Like, it was just terrible. I thought, she gets some help, maybe things will change. The hospital calls a family meeting because they want to send her home, and she's improved. And my girlfriend had seen my adopted mother treat me completely differently to everybody else. And when we sat in the family meeting, she attacked me where the social worker had to hit the table a couple of times to tell her to stop because she went for the verbally at me. When I was cleaning out the house, I found a rifle, and it wasn't registered or anything. And I couldn't find any bullets. That's why I went through the house, because she got a gun and she got bullets. And look, she threatened to kill my adopted sister, I don't know, maybe 12 months before. It's threatened to shoot her. My adopted sister had gone to the house, and the adopted mother had imploded and said, get her, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to kill you. And then the adopted mother had gone into the bedroom, and my sister said, I could hear her rummaging. I thought she's going to bring out a gun. But she didn't. She brought out some sort of paperwork. And I had to tell my adopted sister she did actually have a gun. Like, my poor old adopted sister's having a meltdown over it. I said she had a gun, and I had to take it, and I had to hand it in to the police. So, unfortunately, the hospital couldn't find anything wrong with her and sent her home. And, yeah, can you believe this? So can she act well? Oh, most definitely.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like a turtle. It's like witchcraft, man.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, seriously. Yeah.
No dementia,
She,
no
yeah.
nothing, no whatever.
Enchanted.
Oh,
Enchanted, if that's the word. Yeah.
yeah.
Whatever,
And
whatever the word is they use, but that's
yeah,
some type.
yeah.
Yeah.
The social worker couldn't get over how the three of our siblings were standing there trying to help this woman after she'd heard some of our stories. She'd gone, all my life, I've never, ever, ever come across the children who have been through the hell that yous have been through wanting to help. She said, we have parents left here and put into retirement villages for nothing and never visited again. And you're standing here trying to help it. All I could say to her was, we were trained well, right? We're adopted. That's the whole reason about being adopted is to fulfill the needs of our adopted parents. You know, and I had compassion for her, but in reality, I see it for what it is that we were trained well. This is why we went through hell. We couldn't just walk away from these people because of the mind games and the push and the pull and what society says that we're supposed to do as adopted people. So anyway, my brother had arranged for my adopted mother to get some outside help, and he couldn't take her to the hospital for an appointment, and a doctor's appointment, a social worker's appointment. He said, could you do it? Now, before I left the hospital, the staff said to me, never be alone with her, Kerri. And I'm looking at him going, I'm 50 odd years old now. I had to grow up with that. You're telling me I'm not safe as an adult? So don't ever be alone with her.
Right. Where were you when I was 5?
What do you think of that? It's like, don't ever be alone. I'm like, are you serious? I survived my childhood with this woman. Right? So my brother agrees, and he's like, well, I need you to go and pick her up, take her to these couple of appointments. He said, can you take our younger sister with you? I said, yes. So I rocked up at the house, and I watched the adoptive mother come out, and the minute she saw me, I just watched it straight down. She did, because at first she was with my sister, and then she turned the corner, and she just saw me, and this whole demeanor just changed. She morphed into something else. Got in the car beside me. My little sister's trying to tell her, oh, you know, because I got a little mini, you know, it's a pretty cool little car. She's just trying to create natural conversation. And straight away, this adopted mother's into me. I'm trying to drive. She's into me like, I hate you. I hate you kids. You're nothing but trouble. You're nothing but garbage. And I want to divorce you. Especially you, Kerri. And I'm like, so I'm driving in the traffic, but she's at me with this. If it had happened years ago, I probably would have driven my car straight into a tree. But I was pretty much holding my own, and I just looked at her and just calmly said, well, I'd like a divorce too. So when you arrange it, this is what you've got to do. Because I'd already looked into what they call discharge of adoption, because I was going to follow through with it, where I emancipate myself out of my adoption. So she's saying she wants to do it. And I said, this is what you have to do. You have to apply to the Supreme Court and blah, 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 blah. And it'll cost you 40 grand plus. I've already looked into it. And I said, go for it. I said, I'm looking forward to my day in court. I'd like that. So I just said it like that.
You turned the tables on her. Wow.
Yeah, I was like, bring it on. I'm cool with it. I don't mind. Right? So it kind of shut her down for a little while. And then I was supposed to go in with her, with the social worker, so we could be truthful about what's happening with her, but she refused to let us in. So I had to sit there for 40 minutes or so. She comes out, social worker. She probably went there and lied about me like she normally does, right? I'm this terrible person that's trying to, I don't know, lock her away probably. And then we got to take her to the doctor's appointment, and they sit down, and there's about 5 or 6 staff in behind the counter. There's about 25 people, patients waiting, and there was barely anywhere for me to sit. So my sister and my adopted mother sit side by side, and I noticed I have to sit a few seats down because there's nowhere for me to sit. And I decided to sit, wait for her to see a doctor's appointment, and we're out of here. All of a sudden, this is what my adopted mother would do, and she repeated the same thing. I'm sitting there at 50 odd years of age. She leans forward, She makes sure to make eye contact with me. She raises her voice so everybody will hear her. And then she starts saying, your auntie such and such visited the other day. And she says, because I live with my best friend, right? We're the best of mates. We're like sisters. We're just friends. But my adopted mother goes, she wants to know why you and my friend, are so close. You must be a lesbian at the top of her lungs. You must be, and said in such a derogative way, right? So I'm like sitting there, and everybody, so you could see everybody sort of stealing themselves seats. So at the minute she stopped speaking, I stood up, raised my voice, and said, "Yep, better than that than a child abuser." And I just walked. You saw
Wow.
the people behind the desk, just their faces just come up, right? Just looked up at me, and I just stood and just walked past her. And my little sister's going, "Oh, that's enough." And I said, "Yep, I reckon it's enough to, to her, to my sister," and just walked out. So we're driving back to the house, and I'm thinking I'm going to cop it more in the car. She wasn't too bad. She thanked me for cleaning the house. I've got a migraine by this stage, right? Who knows? You know why. So I'm pulling to her front yard, and I need a drink of water because I need to take some medication. I've got a migraine. And I just said to her, "Could I please come and get a drink of water?" She says, "No." I said, "I've got a migraine." "No, don't care." And then she sat there and she attacked me, and she attacked me, and she attacked me. Basically calling me a pathetic daughter, useless, like, where have I been? Why have I not been there for her? Blah, 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 blah. Like, it was pretty bad. I stepped out of the car. I took 2 steps back. I looked at her. My hands went like this, and I'm like, why? Like, I don't understand why we're doing this. Like, I'm trying to save your life. I shouldn't even be here. Like, I don't get it. I don't get why you like this. And then she started attacking my little sister. My little sister had a terrible. She didn't do things the way the adopted mother expected, like get married first and have children. And my sister ended up on the wrong side of the law for a little while. So she then started getting stuck into her, and that's when I basically said to my little sister, "Don't listen to one word she said." I said I did everything their way, got married, had kids, owned my own business, never broke the law, never took drugs, never good enough. On any level, has my life ever been good enough? They keep moving the hoop, right? So I said, I don't listen to anything she's saying. And at that stage, she then attacked me over the man I married. And I'm going, really? Look at the man you married. Like, my brain's going, oh, geez. And then she sat there because I wasn't getting upset. I wasn't deteriorating. I wasn't showing any anger. I was just meeting it where it was at, right? Frustrated, yes, but not. And all of a sudden, she just broke down and she said, "I just want to be with your father." And I knew then that she was going to end her life. I knew then. She says, "I don't want to see you again. You'll be nothing but trouble." And she got out of the car, and I said, "Well, that's not what we want." And then I watched her walk into the house. 4 weeks later, she was dead. She starved herself to death.
Wow.
So that was hard. That was like, knowing that I had done everything possible to try and prevent that. When I walked into the house after her body had been taken away, she had deliberately set things out on the kitchen bench and the kitchen table. Cards and letters, and a letter that I'd written to her many years ago confronting her about the abuses and my fractured spine. And so it was very deliberate. She she was making sure to stick the knife in still after death. So yeah, surviving mother.
Well, you've done a lot more than survive, honey.
Yeah.
You've completely overcome. I mean, from that to me was someone who was possessed. She's definitely had the witch's spirit, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely not. That's why I say human beings are different to these creatures that were something
Yeah.
was put in. Wow. Well, I'm very grateful that you're here to tell your story and to share with us and to be who you are for the world. It's not an easy or a comfortable story to listen to, that's for sure.
No.
But I think what we can all know with you is that you were and still are truly a light in this world. And I thank you, honestly, I thank you for stepping forward and sharing your story and being the advocate for the forced adoptions, and whether it's child or parent, God has put you on your path so that you can expose this type of stuff. And I don't believe for 1 second that this is the minority. I think a lot of these things that you talk about are actually happening in a major way around the world. And especially, as you said, during that time between the 50s and the 80s, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I've spoken, because of all the work that I've been doing, I've spoken to many adoptees, and if you can believe it, they're like, the adoptees that I've spoken to have been through worse situations than myself. And, I do see it as being a bit of a miracle that I can talk about it. I remember the first time.
You are a miracle, Kerri. You're just a lovely little miracle, a 4'9" one.
Yeah. The first time I ever tried to talk about it, I went blind, literally, twice.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I believe that. That's what I'm saying. It's like these are all things that are, that are put on you to stop you. It's all part of the process of not letting you guys speak.
Yeah.
And the more you speak, the more you transcend that, honestly. So thank you for the bravery of speaking and using your voice and sharing with us what you've been through, for sure. It's crazy.
Yeah. And that's it. Like and I think I mentioned it to Caleb in a post, like every breath that we take, every time we speak out, it's assault against the enemy and is a win for God. It's a win for us.
Absolutely.
And it's a win for God.
Absolutely.
Because, like years ago, adoptees weren't speaking openly like this at all by any stage about what we endured. And this is the first time I've really ever gotten into my adoptive mother and, what some of the things she did. I've not shared it anywhere else.
Look at Walkabout with Kerri.
Thanks for that. That's a Aussie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for you do. I alerted a family member dealing with 2 kids recovering from trauma like yours. She's been following your journey since on here.
Thank you.
That's why you come on here, Kerri.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And guys, I want to remind you, as of next year, I don't know the date, I've got to go and buy a new diary now. No, yes, I know. I still work on paper.
Me too.
No, anyway, we do. Oh yeah, I still have my Filofax, right? The one that comes from, I don't know when I bought this. I still have it, and every year I buy the new inserts. So we're going to be, Kerri's going to be on a Monday. So every second Monday, and not on a Friday anymore, on Aquarius Rising Africa, Kerri will be on a Monday. Same time, I think. I don't think we'll change the time unless you want to change the time, but watch the space. We will be letting you know about the new time slot for Kerri as well.
I hope that's okay by everyone that's been watching on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm sure. I hope it will be. And otherwise, if you can't join the live chats, you can always, get the recording. And yeah,
I love the chats. Wild Aussie woman, well done, Kerri. Mic drop.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I must say, I did really get a bit of enjoyment in the doctor's surgery. When I said I'd rather be that than a child abuser. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Lesbian. You're such a lesbian.
She was trying to embarrass me in public, which she would always do. And I think I shocked the pants off. I shocked the pants off everybody sitting in the surgery. But sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And
what a way to take yourself out there through starving yourself. I mean, what a terrible thing. I would rather just take an overdose of meds. Seriously, just give me a handful of sleeping pills and let me not wake up again. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. But the way I think about it is just like, why would you want to starve yourself to death? That must be such
Chantelle,
a terrible
I kind
way
of
to
see
go.
it like this. When you're not able to give that sort of love, you're not capable of loving yourself. She must have really
That's so
hated
true.
herself, And
well, that's why I say, to take yourself, to literally deprive yourself of life. We understand that is really, and it's so true, because when people like that get to their old age, and it's like, if you look at also the Caleb's book, when he was on forgiveness of his mom, she was the catalyst for, literally, she held the key to the darkness that happened in his life as well. And we'll still get to more of those stories in his life, which I'm not going to talk about now. I'll leave that up to him to share. But at the end, she had dementia, literally not being able to remember anything, and just this absolute blocking out all the memories, until right at the end, I mean, she looked at him and there was a moment where she remembered. She saw everything, and she saw how she had actually literally instigated what had occurred in his life as well. And that's what I'm saying, they then block it off. They can't remember it. They can't think about it. They can't acknowledge it. In this case, your mom, obviously, and also, also Freemason family. And that's why, I mean, they get indoctrinated in whatever way they do. They have these entities taking over their bodies to do the most awful things. And this is literally how they punish themselves later on in life. Yeah. It's like they don't believe they deserve anything better.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, that is absolutely what has happened here as well. She could not deal with her own choices, her own karma, basically. So, wow.
Yeah, incredibly sad. I do see it that way. I think that she was given 4 beautiful children that could have filled the hole up in her life. And she chose not to take make the best of it. We all have bad things thrown at us. The fact that they lost their own biological child, but what evolved out of that? You've got to then face it, deal with your grief, and then if you're given 4 children, lucky to be given 4 of the children from handed them, but they never cherished it. They never cherished it by any means, and that's sad. That's and I don't know, there's like the repercussions of it is there are 4 of us that have had to deal with the immense trauma of their inability to deal with their own stuff. And who's complicit but our government in this? Like, they've never taken any responsibility for what happened to me. And I've dealt with it. I'm still dealing with it. Like, I'm 61 now. Like, I'm dealing with it much better, but I'm still dealing with it. I'm still dealing with it physically as well as mentally.
Exactly. Okay, guys and girls, I have another appointment coming up, so I've got to love and leave you all. Kerri, do you want to end for us in prayer before we say goodbye?
Yes. Okay. All right. Oh, gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this lovely time that we could meet together. I thank you, Lord, for the people that hear this story, and I hope that inspires them, Lord, to keep fighting and to believe in themselves and to love themselves. I hope they believe that you love them too. We just want to leave you now, Lord. We want everybody to go away with such a blessing and feel uplifted, Lord, and knowing how much you love all of us and want what's best for us. Thank you for Chantelle's efforts in this little YouTube channel, Lord. Please put a beautiful blessing upon her. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I love that. Okay, guys. Kerri, thank you so much. So we'll see you back next year.
Yes, on a Monday. So yes,
On Mondays from next year.
yeah.
Watch the schedule, guys. We'll let you know.
And I
Okay.
hopefully have 2 guests with me for the next show. So
Yeah, looking forward
I'm working
to that.
on it. So yes.
Looking forward to that. Okay, everybody.
You need to give me a date. You need to give me a date. You need to give me a date.
Yeah, I will. When I have my new diary. It'll be not Monday coming up, but probably the one after that, whatever that date is. I just don't have the dates here in front of me right now. But it will be, so 2 weeks from now, basically. Okay. All right, guys. God bless you all. Have a beautiful new year. We're looking forward to seeing you in the new year. And remember, for those of you who'd like to join us for the gathering with Caleb on Sunday, day for me, or evening for me, middle of the morning for you Aussies, and in the middle of the morning, like the next morning for you Aussies, and early in the morning for you Americans. What can I say? We're all we're from all over the world, but we'll figure it out. It'll be 8 p.m. GMT +2. That's South African time. This show starts at 7 p.m. We'll do an hour of the show, and that'll be on Solutions with Aquarius Rising Africa. And then we will move over to the Zoom gathering. We will just have a live chit chat and just connect. It was very cool having it on Christmas Eve. Awesome, everybody. Take good care of yourselves. We'll chat to you soon.
Bye, everyone.